Hey y'all. So the last 2 days we had our state conference. So if you don't know, I am the immediate past president of the Association of School Psychologists of Pennsylvania, asponline.org. Look us up. Um, and we had our state conference, and it has been a multitude of emotions. For the one, it was one of my first times really engaging in a space where I was one of the few since the election. Also, understanding that I live in a predominantly white environment. So I kind of went inward and isolated myself because I needed to do my own self-soothing. And I just needed to be. But realizing that I'm on the board, immediate past president, we have our conference. And as I'm driving to pick up our keynote Monday night, I started having heart palpitations, which I haven't had in a number of years. And that was allowing me, my body was letting me know, you need to do some work. You need to breathe. You need to ground yourself because you're about to have to navigate the space about being on and being in front of people. And because I'm such an extrovert, I love being around people. I get energy from people. But because I'm so depleted, I was navigating, how do I enter this space when I'm so depleted, when I'm navigating the grief, the frustration, all the things that I'm feeling, and still be in community. And what I tell you is, as a president who was the first person of color, as the first school psychologist of color, coming into an organization back in 2008 or profession in 2008, and I didn't really feel like I was seen or that there are people that look like me. The running joke is, it's so true, y'all. If you see me at our National Association of School Psychologists or Association of School Psychologists of Pennsylvania, I am the welcoming committee. I'm running through the field like, sister, like color purple, greeting you, being my full-on awkward Black girl, Issa Rae self. Hi, my name's Amber. What's your name? Like, I'm doing the whole thing. And that's not really awkward Black girl, but I am. A lot of people tell me, you'll have to let me know. Do you know who you look like? Does anyone ever told you? Yes, Issa Rae. Yes, Insecure. But have you seen the original awkward Black girl? I think it's the energy, Issa. I'm not sure. They say I'm giving off that energy. At any rate, look, now I lost my train of thought. Awkward Black girl in the making here. Thinking about being in these spaces, running through and finding people scanning in the room. If you are one of the only people in a space, and y'all know this to be true, y'all will scan that room and try to find someone that looks like you, that has a similar identity as you. And what that helps you do is feel like you belong. It helps you feel safe. And what I will say is that in this space, and the last 2 days, Tuesday and Wednesday, not only did I see people that looked like me, there were sessions that spoke to intersecting identities, that spoke to people's lived experience that come from historically marginalized groups. There was an intention behind it. Our keynote speaker was Dr. Janice Parker, and how she weaved in history and education, the historicity of race, and how it's impacted this idea to be status quo, and how we are trying to make people, we have historically tried to make people, Black and brown people, into this idea of whiteness, and how this ideology of whiteness can be harmful, is harmful to all of us. And her overall message of community resonated so deeply with me. And I love the images that she chose, thinking about the civil rights movement. I often say this in my work, is that those images were intentionally scrubbed so that you could not see Black and brown people, Black and white people, side by side, holding hands, marching for freedom and liberation. It was a united effort, because that narrative is that this is an issue that you need to handle. This is a Black issue. This is a brown issue. This is not my issue. And we see how that plays out if you look at the exit polls, right, that I talked about in my blog post this week that Joyanne Reed really broke down. And thinking about community, thinking about school psychologists, and what our role is in disproportionate outcomes for Black and brown students from other margins, and what we need to do better. So I'm just really grateful for the space that was created, and for our secretary, Shannon Dressler, who is also our conference chair, for the entire committee that was really intentional, the submissions that came in, and just getting excited about seeing the possibilities, and that we as school psychologists talk about we can do hard things. We're trained in psychology and all these things, conflict resolution, consultation. And when it gets to the hard thing, y'all, we be the first ones to be quiet. But what I witnessed, particularly yesterday, in a session led by Shweta Guerra, who is our current ASP president, who is Southeast Asian. And let me tell you, y'all, when you assume a role and you're the only one, you're the first one, there is an awful lot of pressure. So me being the first Black person, awful lot of pressure. And on one hand, it's this tokenization that it's a good look for the organization. And some of us will succumb to that and be like, I'm just going to keep the peace. I don't want to rock the boat too much. And then you have people like me who do it in the sense of getting curious, asking questions, meeting with people individually and building relationships and understanding the history of the organization, understanding where we're aligned and misaligned, and understanding the opportunities for growth, not as complaints, not as shame on a group of people, but understanding that, hey, we have some people that want to make some changes, and change is hard. Change is hard, y'all. It can be painful, especially if your identities are attached so strongly to the way things have been. So there's been a lot of growth. And what I've heard from people, because I was president for 2 years, particularly people that look like me, I joined because of you. I feel seen because of you. I got into leadership because of you. I wanted to be on the board because of you. Has been beautiful. So when you think about representation matters, it's not just a hashtag. It is real. And we know windows versus mirrors, like when you feel seen, and think of all the harm that's done when you don't see anyone in a position of power or where their dignity is so upheld, and you see the opposite over and over and over again, which has been a lot of my experience, it very much can shrink your level where you belong, where you fit in. And in a lot of Black communities, I can be an athlete, I can be an entertainer. Never thinking, can I be an academic? Can I be a doctor or a lawyer? All these other things that you could be, an engineer. It limits your scope because you're not able to dream beyond sometimes what you see. So I'm grateful for people expressing that to me. I'm also grateful for bearing witness to Shweta, who is Southeast Asian, and being in a space where her and her colleague did a session about their lived experience and how that impacts students and how we can support them as school psychologists, and bearing witness to another Southeast Asian practitioner who felt so comfortable and so elated, and her eyes were lighting up because she felt so seen. And she was so comfortable in sharing her experience and chiming in. And what happened in that room was a beautiful example of what we can do in community when we have different people from different backgrounds, how we can have hard conversations, how we can decenter ourselves and center someone else's experience that has historically been erased, invisible, all the things. And we can have meaningful conversation and call each other in and still do the work. So it was a great lesson for me to see that being the first is not easy, but reaping that harvest and seeing how we're growing, and hearing a story from another colleague who said he was in a space and another one of our colleagues who's Muslim met another school psychologist who is Muslim, and she has never met another Muslim school psychologist. Was really beautiful to hear about him being able to experience that, because that's what it's about. Our field is vast, it's diverse. We serve vast and diverse students, but sometimes in spaces, it often looks like we are the only ones. So as we continue to change that, as we continue to grow and continue to create access for people who look like me, for people from intersecting identities, who haven't felt traditionally that they belong in this setting. But when we look at the history of education, which Dr. Parker really helped us to see, we understand our community is important. And how are we building community? So part of it is me, I need to replenish myself. 2 days at a conference is a lot, especially on top of navigating the election results. So giving myself grace, turning inward once again, but acknowledging all of the strides within our state organization, acknowledging people who are gracious and giving flowers where they're due to the coordinator of the entire conference, to our current president, to even looking at our board and how we're more diverse. We have 2 Black male school psychologists, and they're 1% of the field. We now have on our board coming in, we'll have a Black secretary, Black female secretary. We are growing. We have AAPI people now being delegates. It is a beautiful thing to see when the narrative can often be when you don't see seen in these spaces, and when you only see people from the dominant culture. I don't belong there. They're maintaining a status that I don't want to maintain. So when you can have people in a space, it helps to disrupt the narrative that you don't belong simply because I exist. So when I come into spaces, I say this all the time. There's a positionality that all of us carry, which is your body is read as text. Top of my head to the sole of my feet. When you see me, your brain is already going to tell you a story about me. Sometimes it's bad if you haven't been in relationship with people that look like me. And if you see yourself in me, it helps you feel at ease and feel seen. Like, hey, if she's there, then I can be there too. And my message is always that you belong here. And the last thing I'll say is I had a conversation with a colleague who has a disability. And as we're navigating and talking, she's a white woman, I'm a Black woman. So there's some commonalities in our womanhood, but I am very able-bodied. I can access everything because my body allows me to. I don't have any of those barriers to navigate. And the one thing she said to me that really resonated was, because the day before there was a harm done, and I said, and she's like, it's okay, and I'm like, it's not okay. And what that was giving her permission to not do the niceties, which we always do when we come from a marginalized group. We will say the thing to make everyone else comfortable. And she sat with that, and the next day she came back. She says, I thought about what you said, and it's not okay. And we were able to talk and have an engaging conversation about how people that come from the margins, people that are historically told to shrink in so many ways, we will constantly appease and make sure that everyone else from dominant culture is comfortable. So from her experience when she's working with students with disabilities, is that the students, in very intentional ways, and it's not like you are taught this explicitly, but you know this, it's ingrained in us, they will go out of their way to make sure that people that are dominant, that don't have their disability, are comfortable. And she was saying, wouldn't it be something if that was reversed? If people that had the privilege and the power and had the access at all times could shift and decenter themselves. She didn't use those words, but those are my words. Decenter themselves and center those people from different backgrounds, different disabilities. How much different would the experience be? She's talking about entering a space and not having to do anything to perform her disability and just being at ease. Think of how many of us aren't at ease in our spaces, and particularly for me, in predominantly white spaces in central Pennsylvania, which is predominantly white, in light of the election, honoring what I'm feeling, where it sits in my body, and questioning the why behind it, the level of discomfort that I have normalized, the level of hypervigilance that I have normalized. And as I was processing yesterday when I got elevated from someone that said something that activated me, and how my hamster wheel started going in my chest, how did I have to come back to myself and come back home to myself and tell myself that I was safe? It's a powerful lesson when you can be present and understand what your body's trying to tell you. So I just encourage you, as we're in community, as we're trying to navigate, some of us, particularly there's a movement right now with Black women that find someone else to do it. Ain't my responsibility, as we're navigating this grief and getting through it. And as I am one who is an Enneagram 8, if you don't know anything about the Enneagram, look it up. Enneagrams 8s are activists. Enneagram 8s will fight for the underdog at all cost, at our own expense. I do this all the time. It's so much inherent in who I am. Um, and I had to think about that. So the Enneagram 8, when I look at Chichi Gorham's work, Black Liberation for the Enneagram, I think it's something like that. But she's talking particularly to Black women and how eights are activists, eights fight for the underdogs, eights really struggle with the superwoman cape. So what I appreciate about this movement right now and how we're coming out of this pain as we're navigating this pain and this grief is that Black women are saying, I can no longer shoulder this. I can no longer wear this cape. And as I'm navigating that, and I have the impulse and the urge to call people in, to challenge, to disrupt, I have to give myself permission to say that it can't always be me, that I have to continue, as my colleague and friend, Dr. Nicole Holland-Sims says, build the coalition of the willing. How do we build community? I was talking to our graduate students the other night in school psychology, and I said, if you're the one that is always the one saying the thing, that's me. I'll say it. No problem. You ain't got to worry about it. I'm going to say it. I'm going to call you in. We're going to get curious about it. We're going to solve the issue. But no one is there to echo you. That is a problem, because then it becomes, in my case, that's Amber's issue. And what we miss in that is that there's a root cause. There's a systemic issue that we're not addressing. It's kind of like, oh, there's a few bad eggs, right? That is problematic. So as we continue to build, as we continue to grow, as we continue to build this community, how do we build a coalition of the willing? How do we also, and I can say we as Black women, give ourselves the rest that we deserve and not have to fix and heal a nation of people, right? I mean, wear it on the back every day. I think I'm going to put up the image. There's an image that I saw the other day. It's an image of an elderly Black woman with the American flag around here, and there's some history behind that. But that weariness is killing us slowly. And I didn't recognize it more fully until I've done the work to get back in my body. And that hamster wheel, that cortisol level that's going around my chest and through my body is killing me slowly. And it's killing so many Black women that feel like it is our fight and our fight alone. We're not alone in this. We're giving ourselves permission to rest. We're giving ourselves permission to be. So for those of you that are in primarily white communities like me, one of the things I want you to think about is like, how are you navigating your spaces? How are you finding time for you to just be when you are already hypervigilant, right? And even more so now after this most recent election, people are talking about 2016 and how they felt then. And for me, it was after George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and going back into the office and work, and how I felt so unsafe and so unsupported because everything was a good look. We'll make the statement and then we'll go back to status quo. How are you doing the work to build your community, to feel safe when you're in these spaces? And for those of you who are in predominantly diverse or Black spaces, I'm really curious about how you are healing. What is the difference between those of us that are doing this grief work in primarily white communities versus those that are doing it in communities where they don't have to go, miles down the road, cities over to find people that look like them. There's a community right there. So I'm really curious about how you're grieving. I'd love to hear from you about that. What is the difference? Listen, where are you located? Because maybe I'll move there. But in all seriousness, I'm really curious about what this level of healing looks like when you are one of the only ones. That sense of otherness is exhausting. And even though I feel that deeply almost every day, and our field is predominantly white, what I found was when you create a community, a culture where you're aligned with your values, and particularly our organization at the national and state level is social justice. We're about inclusion, all of the things, right? That sound great on paper, but when you can actually live that out loud, it makes you feel safe. So think about what your organizations are doing. Are they really exemplifying what they're putting on paper? Because 9 times out of 10, most organizations say the right thing on paper, and then there's a lot of harm done. And that's a lot of the work that I do. So when I go into spaces, I'm usually getting called in because there's some harm that's been done and they need some help. So I'm just grateful for ASP, for the executive committee, for the board, for allowing me to be the president the past 2 years and laying some foundation, laying some groundwork so that we can continue to work on what it means to belong, what it means to take up space, as our current president has said, which is a disruption for her as a Southeast Asian woman who's told to shrink. Taking up space, giving ourselves permission to be something other than what the world told us to be, getting back to what our authentic self is, and disrupting and unlearning the patterns of being this cookie cutter image of what the world says, and removing that and thinking about, but what am I really supposed to be doing? And as I continue to walk in my fullness and my authenticity, what I continue to see is it gives people permission to do the same. And these are people that look like me. They have different identities, but what it does when you can walk in a space and be you, and you can align with that, other people get curious about that. They say, well, why am I over here pretending to be someone different? We miss out on your greatness when you do that. There's so much that this world needs. But if you're sitting here being a very cookie cutter version of yourself, if you're detaching yourself and being a very bifurcated version of yourself and thinking that you can't bring your full emotions into a space, that emotionality is somehow childish, we're human beings. So the more that we can be fully integrated into who we are, the more that we can cultivate safe spaces where we can be ourselves, it's going to give people permissions to be the same. So what are you doing in this season to work on your wholeness, to grieve well, to get in touch with who you are innately before this world told you that ain't it? All that stuff that you want to do, all that stuff that makes you come alive, we don't need that in this world, and we do. So how in this season can you get back to the thing that makes you come alive? Because as you do that, you're helping the rest of us do the same. As you continue to show up in spaces and take up space, there's enough for all of us, y'all. This is not a scarcity mindset where if I take up space, it's making someone else shrink. There's enough room for all of us. And as you grow and take up space, as you come into your own and you get your shoulders back and you keep your head up high, watch what happens. Not just younger generations, your peers, older generations will start doing the same. And watch how we transform the world. So take care, y'all. It is Thursday. We almost to the weekend. But make sure we're taking some time each day, multiple times a day, to check in, to just be, to honor who you are as a human being on this earth in this moment, and what that means for what you can do within your sphere of influence to transform this world, to make it more open and honest and human for us as human beings.